And the applicant is here, so we can get started.
Yes.
Okay, folks, it's 7 o'clock, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the November 20th, 2018 Planning Board meeting. My name is Kathy Barnard. I'm the chairman. Let me introduce quickly the other members of the Planning Board, starting down at extreme right. Brad Harriman, who's the Board of Selectmen's representative to the Planning Board. Peter Goodwin, Mike Hodder, Vice Chairman Von Dugan and Susan Replier. Matt Sullivan is the Planning Director, and is Kathy coming?
Kathy will not be here this evening.
Oh, okay.
So we have community TV here tonight.
Okay, all right. So the first item on the agenda tonight is a application that we continued from a week ago for 990 Center Street. And this is for a two-lot subdivision, tax map 71-1 and 2, case 2018-29. Applicant? Why don't you, I think we left off at the last meeting. You had started to explain the application, but you may want to go through a brief presentation and also speak to the waivers that you're requesting.
Yes.
And we do have the letter of authorization that caused the hearing to be continued until tonight. So we've all received that. Thank you very much, and sorry to hold up the application, but why don't you go for it now?
Well, thank you for seeing us tonight at your work session. We did get hung up last week because we did not have a letter of authorization. We do have that now. So I'd like to correct your introduction a little bit, Madam Chairman. This is not a subdivision per se, but it's a lot line adjustment. Two lots are entering. They're going to be reconfigured and two lots disappear. So, excuse me, two lots remain. There is no new lot per se. It is on tax map 71, lots 1 and 2. Mr. Peel, the Frederick Peel Trust, owns lot 1. This lot tract, 175 acres. 1,000 feet of road frontage on 28. His, for frontage and area purposes, is a conforming lot. We are in the rural 5-acre zone. Lot 2 is owned by Mr. Spencer. This small piece right here runs back to here. It has conforming road frontage being greater than 300 feet, but it does not meet 5 acres, so it's non-conforming by way of area. This lot line adjustment is to have Mr. Peel sell to Mr. Spencer 1.6 acres behind his current lot. Shown here is parcel A. Little area of 1.6 acres. It runs back, the rear boundary line after this lot line adjustment will be the center of the Willie Brook, being a natural monument. Parcel A, which is the 1.6 acres, has been flagged for wetlands by Peter Cooperdock, who's a wetland scientist. And Mr. Spencer had applied for a site plan review in 2011, and that wetlands was mapped to, also shown on this plan. So we did not remap the original, but we did do new mapping on the land to be conveyed, known as Parcel A. There's no change in road frontage by this lot line adjustment. We are requesting several waivers. The first waiver is a waiver for the scale of the plan. Per the regulations, the maximum scale is 1 inch equals 100. This map is 1 inch equals 200. And the reason is to make it a more user-friendly document get it on a single page rather than 3 pages, which would be a 1 inch equals 100 scale. You have to remember, when you double the scale, you not only double its height, you also double its width. So 1 page can turn into 4 sometimes. That would be known as Regulation 174-7B4 scale. The second waiver is 174-7D3 site features. This waiver applies more to Mr. Peel than Mr. Spencer's lot. Again, Mr. Spencer's land has been mapped for wetlands. All buildings are shown on Mr. Spencer's land, his driveway, his parking, his septic system, his well. All those features are there. But on Mr. Peel's land, we have not done the wetlands. We have not done soil sciences. And there are no buildings on Mr. Peel's land. So we're requesting a waiver to those types of features on the 175-acre lot. And one reason for doing so is this is not creating a new lot, it is merely adjusting lines between the 2 lots. To want a level of detail for a subdivision on 175 acres would be a true hardship and huge expense on the applicant. And to be complete, we're requesting a waiver to 174-7, D4, D5, and D6, and that relates to topography, soils mapping, and soils tests. By way of history, Mr. Spencer's land does have soils tests on it when the septic system was first installed. Mr. Peel's does not. We think these waiver requests are reasonable because A, we're dealing with a very large parcel of land. B, a non-conforming lot becomes more conforming. C, no new lots are created and no buildings are proposed at this time. There's no improvements plan, just it's a land transfer. And unless you have some questions, that would be my presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Go ahead, Peter.
What is the reasoning, as in why is this adjustment being made? I mean, it seems reasonable, but why is it being made?
I think Mr. Spencer is feeling rather cramped on his land. It wouldn't surprise me if he would approach you again with some additional improvements, but he's here if he wants to confirm or deny that wild guess of mine. Currently, he is only 2 acres. This will bring him to 3.5, which would be helpful to him.
Can you explain?
It's all property which is close to Willie Brook, though, so it's not all.
It's not all high and dry, that's for sure. And there are wetlands associated with Willie Brook, too, per Mr. Cooperdoc's work.
What are the 2, maybe driveways, forky things that go off on either side of the building that go to Wiley Brook? These structures here, what is that? What is that?
Oh, that's the, looks better on the larger plan. Would that be the wetlands there?
Setback.
The inner line, and the one around it is the setback.
Okay.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I need to generate another plan anyway that reflects the monuments having been set. When they are set, I could better label that wetlands boundary and its buffer on that second plan.
Okay.
I have no objection to that being a condition of approval.
Okay. Any other questions right now, folks? Matt, did you have anything? I think we determined the form factor.
It's not applicable to this particular lot based on road frontage. I have no other outstanding items from a completeness perspective, with the exception of the 5 waivers that have been requested by the applicant.
Okay. Okay, the applicant has justified the 5 waivers that are being requested. It seems that they don't affect our ability to act on this lot line adjustment. So if somebody would be willing to make a motion to grant the waivers.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to grant the requested waivers. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions. Okay, since the waivers have been granted, we have the letter of authorization, all of the required documents have been submitted, the application is now complete. If somebody would make a motion to accept this application as
So
complete.
moved.
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right, I can open the public hearing now if there's any member of the public that wanted to comment on this application. If you could make the comment now. Okay. All right. Matt, do you have some conditions for us to consider?
Sure. So I have 5 relatively standard conditions for this boundary line adjustment if approved. Incorporation of the, condition number 1 is incorporation of the proposed lot line adjustment plan dated October 23rd, 2018. Second is the applicant shall be responsible for monumentation and submission of a certificate of monumentation and updated plans that are actually stamped by a licensed land surveyor. Condition 3, the applicant shall submit the Mylar plan for recording at the Carroll County Registry of Deeds. Condition 4, payment of all recording fees. And condition 5 is the incorporation of all the documentation submitted in the application package as part of the approval.
Is there another plan coming?
So relative to your question specifically, I think Mr. Berlin is amenable to adding or enhancing the wetlands appearance, the wetlands buffer appearance on the plan for recording. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. That amendment could be incorporated as part of
also-
condition number 1.
Be at a larger scale? This is microscopic. I mean, I understand in the scope of the whole property, but could you do it at 1 inch and 20 for the parcel that is the new bigger parcel?
That wasn't my original thought. It was to be on this 200 scale plan, but I would better label the wetlands and the buffers. What you're looking at is very, very small, Vaughn.
It is small.
More legible here.
Yeah.
Not perfect, but more legible.
Okay.
If it's a matter of legibility, it should be fine once you get up to that scale that you're proposing.
Pardon me?
Legibility should be fine when you get up to the scale, something larger than what we have in front of us that you're describing.
Yes, it's more legible on this sheet, which
basically
will be
agreeing with
recorded.
Yep.
Not the 11 by 17.
Right, okay.
Right.
Vaughn, are you okay with that? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay, it's all right if we
in the
add
future, we could
add
ask
that.
on these small pieces carved out of huge pieces that they
Secondary
have a
plan.
plan that shows that parcel.
Point.
Do we want to make that a condition of approval?
No, I don't think we should.
Larger scale here won't be 20, but I might be able to get an 80 or a 60 of just the Spencer parcel.
I think we should maybe, well, that's fine,
let's
but
set that as precedent now.
Of
Yeah.
asking for a larger scale of the small piece.
So could we have two plans under condition number 1, one being the current plan that's proposed here, and then the second being a plan at whatever scale the surveyor is able to provide for the smaller parcel?
Would be great.
We put it on the same page in a different viewport, they call it.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Just
Okay,
detailed
one
parcel A
plan,
and
a
its
detailed
wetlands.
plan. Okay, yep.
Okay,
Okay.
that's easy.
Okay, everyone comfortable? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. It seems this lot line adjustment is actually the lot that's, the smaller lot is becoming more conforming, even though it is not conforming, but it's becoming more conforming. So from a zoning standpoint, it seems like this is a good reason to approve this application. Somebody wants to make a motion?
Sure, I'd be happy to move that this board approve case number 2018-29, 990 Center Street, tax map 071-001 and 071-002, lot line adjustment with the 5 conditions as described by the planner, including the addition of the smaller inset onto the larger plan showing the wetlands delineation of the smaller of the 2 lots.
Okay, thank you. Motion has been made, and somebody want to second it?
Seconded.
And seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you very much, folks. Drive safely.
Thank you, and have a happy Thanksgiving.
The next item on the agenda is the opportunity for public comment, but I have the sense that people are here for other agenda items, so we'll just continue on. Matt, did you want to comment on the communications quickly?
I've included an article from the New Hampshire Municipal Association. This is one of the association's, I think perhaps the first comment that they've had on 5G wireless facilities as it pertains to the public right-of-way. And this is really just informational, I think, at this point in time, but I can tell you that a lot of planners around the state are beginning to talk about what preparations need to be made for the implementation of 5G technology on our utility poles, principally. So I think this is just sort of an interesting read from a regulatory perspective as we prepare for that, because it is possible that that technology could be rolled out in the state of New Hampshire in 2019, potentially, and we need to be prepared for it as we move forward. I've also seen a lot of planners looking for some sort of model ordinance that communities could adopt. One interesting part of that is that Wolfeboro is somewhat unique in that we have municipal ownership of our utility poles, so a model ordinance that works for most of the 200 communities in the state may not be well applied here in Wolfeboro, so we need to start having some creative thought about what we would do here once this 5G technology becomes a reality.
Can we get pictures, scaled pictures of the equipment, just so we can see what kind of impact we're looking at?
I'm not sure that we have that information available yet, to be quite honest with you. I'm not sure if we're totally clear on what that equipment will look like on the poles, so that's an unknown too.
It really depends. Up here, Verizon is going to be the one to roll out 5G because they're the ones who have the biggest coverage up here. The 5G transmitters will be as big as the area that they need to cover. So if an area like on my part of North Main Street, the houses are fairly widely separated, the transmitter will have to be fairly strong on each of the individual poles. So you're thinking about something about yay high, yay wide, yay deep, colored gray, mounted somewhere on a telephone pole. But besides the aesthetic interruption of the neighborhood, my concern about 5G is the unknown and untested health effects of millimeter wave radiation coming off of these things. There has been a study done in the EU, signed off by, I think it was 180 neuroscientists and engineers, requesting the European Union's Parliament to look closely at the health effects of millimeter wave radiation on living animals prior to allowing the rollout of 5G in the EU. That was published in 2017, but nothing has been done as yet as for studies. The EU has not started rolling out 5G, but there's a lot of commercial pressure to push 5G because 5G can provide very fast coverage in rural areas at a cheap price. They don't have to build a big tower and then worry about coverage hill to hill. They can just place these transmitters on telephone poles and cover the area within around 500 feet of each telephone pole. Each transmitter has its own area to cover and is able to provide at the very least 4G coverage, if not full 5G coverage. And it's the 5G that's the worrisome side, at least for the EU scientists. So I think myself that Wolfeboro should prepare itself with some kind of ordinance, not necessarily to regulate these things, but at least to be satisfied that when they do come up, because I suspect they're going to come up, that they're hung with the best possible protections for the people nearby them that we can get. And that maybe that's shielding of some sort. Maybe it's the local people get to say whether they want one on their telephone pole or not. I don't know how it'll work, but it's early days, as Matt said, and I think before we start hanging this technology up, we should be satisfied as a town that there are no adverse health effects connected with millimeter wave transmissions.
So how far down the road do we think these requests will be?
I'm not sure. I think as soon as 2019, but I don't anticipate them realistically in that time period. I think it will be further out than that.
We could put it on our work program.
Yeah, I mean, I think it should be on the work program.
19.
I think that it's more likely to be implemented in southern portions of the state earlier, but I do wonder if, because of our unique utility situation, we might be a target or a good test case. So we may be earlier than I anticipate as well. I think it's an unknown.
One of the things that Mike stated, which I don't know whether it's, whether people picked up on, is that these are very short-range devices. And so therefore there are going to be lots of them. And that is one of the things that is, important in this particular way to transmit information. So therefore, if it's a 500-foot range, that means they're every 1,000 feet, which is not a whole lot of distance. And so these are not just the cell tower, which is up on a hill, and another one which is on another hill that's 5 miles away. These are ones which are a fifth of a mile away. So it's different.
Kathy, there is a member of the audience who I know may want to quickly speak to this issue, who has some
Okay.
experience.
All right, sure, yes.
Victor, could you come
Why
up
don't you-
to the microphone?
So we can,
I think Peter's here too, who also has some experience.
okay.
Hi, Victor Druin with Green Mountain Communications. So, on the small pole attachments things, there's a couple things going on. One, we've done probably 300 or 400 of them so far. So I have photos and other things. So if you're looking at what different scenarios look like, we can do that. I can provide them to Matt. He can distribute them so you guys can kind of get a visual. But we've done everything from replacing decorative street lamps to Boylston Street and Newbury Street in Boston, where they're ornate poles, campus settings, to attaching to a conventional wood pole. Some are side mounted, some are top mounted. Depends on your line voltage for your pole. It creates an opportunity, a revenue stream for the electric department, which is one thing. I know the FCC is trying to mandate a pole attachment cost. There's also state legislation that goes back to like 1955, which essentially created the ability for anybody to attach on any pole at any time, and everyone pays the same fee so that you wouldn't pay more than the next guy, or Verizon wouldn't pay more than MetroCast in the case of Wolfeboro for a pole attachment on a pole. Now, you guys are unique in that you have a town-owned infrastructure. You're not. You fall a little bit outside that guideline, and I'm not going to give you legal advice, but at the end of the day, you guys can mandate a little bit of what you would collect on a revenue stream. Regarding the health, Mike, these sites, 3G, 4G, 5G, none of those technologies are millimeter wave. Millimeter wave is a separate technique of backhaul. We do millimeter wave installations. I'm doing some at the Prue Hancock Tower right now in Boston for a different application, but 4G, 5G, LTE is your conventional 700, 800, 1900. It's everything that's existing now in the cellular world, and they're just reallocating some of the existing frequency sets. So anyway, so that you're going to have to do some study on that, but that's false. I can tell you right now that that's not true, right? Anything that we do, I can tell you, is not in the millimeter wave range for small cell applications. So they may use millimeter wave to backhaul it, but most applications, they bring it back with fiber. Whenever they can do fiber, they do fiber. So there is no millimeter wave. I would say in the case of Wolfeboro with trees, millimeter wave doesn't really work if you have any foliage. If you have a branch that came in front of the antenna, game over. Your millimeter goes to sleep. So it wouldn't work. So, when you have flat open range, you can use it, but it wouldn't apply in this particular case, in Wolfeboro's case.
I just have a quick question, if I may, Kathy. When do you think is a realistic time for us to be looking at this technology being implemented in a rural like Wolfeboro?
Okay, so being rolled out, the technology won't fully exist. 5G, the chipsets won't even be available until 2020, but what's happening is carriers Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile are rolling it out now, and it's actually, they say, you know, you see TV commercials, oh, we're doing 5G. I was watching a football game the other day, and we're doing 5G here. 5G doesn't exist. The chipsets don't exist. The standard hasn't been fully developed yet. So what they're doing is a high-end version of 4G. It's kind of 4.5G. The G is the generation 4, generation 5 is what we're talking about. But the reality is that they're prepping, so they're putting the box, they're putting the equipment. It's truly probably a 4G, 4.5G product today, and it will evolve with upgrades later. But anyway, but I mean, I'm happy to give you information. I'm happy to spend time. If you and I want to get together, I can feed you everything I have. You know, so. You know, and you guys can distribute it if on a separate occasion. I'm happy to pull stuff together and get with you guys, but I have about quite a few 30-something years of doing this, so you know, pretty happy to help you guys to any degree that you need. So and Matt can reach out to me.
What is the wavelength of the 5G technology?
Well, so 5G to Verizon means that they're using 700 megahertz, they're using 800 megahertz, they're using 1900 megahertz, they're using 2100 megahertz, 2200 megahertz, or 2500. Now, and it depends. So in New Hampshire, of those 7 frequency blocks that I just listed, they might have licenses for 3. But Sprint might have licenses for 3 different ones, and AT&T might have licenses for 4, and you know, so there's 7 frequency bands. When you're talking millimeter wave, you're talking about 37 gig. There's 40 gig, 60 gig, and 80 gig. They're all licensed. 80 gig is unusual. MIT uses it as a private network. It's something they developed. They own it. You can use it if you get their approval. But
I think that when the time comes for the planning board to begin considering how we should respond to this, that we would be happy to, I'm sure I speak for the whole board, ask you to come on board. Some of the documentation that I've seen, that I have here, talks about 28 gigahertz and 39 gigahertz portions of the spectrum which are becoming available, which will be used, and that these larger bands have been used for backhaul, but what is becoming attractive is to start to use them for actual internet connection for consumers.
Right.
And then we're beginning to become millimeter wave technology there. And that is a concern of mine.
So I'm not telling you that 5, 10, 15 years from now, that's not going to be a product that's out there and available. And the FCC chairman, Pai, right now is very active in, you know, he's basically, if you go on his website and read his mission statement, he is very clear that the first country in the United States to win the race to 5G, this means hundreds of billions of dollars or trillions of dollars of extra revenue, because your other countries are going to be farther behind, because just everything that's going to happen with the capabilities of automating light poles and just all kinds of other things that would go along with it. You know, they're talking about machine-to-machine talking without human intervention. That's what all this gets to 20 years from now, right?
Yeah, that's so exciting for them.
Right.
They can
But
squeeze so much
but the
more data
facts
in
are,
there.
the facts are, is that in Wolfeboro, New Hampshire, in heavily densely forested, treed areas, that doesn't work. So again, today, I'm installing stuff in Boston on the Prue, and I am installing millimeter wave stuff, and I am transmitting, because I can see somebody's window, they can get internet, a gigabit of speed for $49, because they put a little receiver in their window, it's very low power, and they're less than, you know, they're within a less than a quarter-mile range. So, you know, those people love it. You know, the other thing we're doing is going from roof to roof with direct millimeter wave equipment,
Yeah.
and then we're wiring the building.
Yeah.
So,
Which would work downtown.
you know, so you're up at 600 feet, you're above the human population, you're above the people center, and we're doing those. So, you know, there's different applications. For Wolfeboro, I wouldn't have a lot of fear that you're going to see it on every other street pole. You know, when you start talking 500 feet apart, you're talking about street poles are 250 feet apart typically, 2 to 250. So, you know, to see them every third or fourth pole, it's just, the trees would destroy it. So I don't see that as being a way that, unless they change the laws of physics, but I don't think that's happening anytime soon, so,
Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, well, don't go away because you're next on the agenda. We were going to have a discussion about the Pine Hill Road Development District, the petition.
Could we do the petition first this evening and then
Yes.
the other second?
Yes, right.
Madam Chair, I just want to recuse myself from probably both discussions as a board member on the Pine Hill Road development.
Okay. All right, yeah. So we want to do the petition.
Yeah, let's do the
Yeah,
petition
okay,
first.
that's it, yeah.
Mr. Druin submitted a new copy of the petition to me with a small amendment today. I just want to pass that out to the board members. And I included the map as presented prior in your packets. I think I've actually included it 2 times potentially in your packets. And this evening, I think the general topic of conversation is, or the general goal, I think, is to give Mr. Druin feedback on this petition as submitted only. I wouldn't recommend that the board obviously indicate any kind of vote or anything because this is a petition warrant article, but I think feedback is really critical for Mr. Druin's success moving
Okay,
forward.
so this is the map that's being proposed.
The amendment to that is that the area in front of the, and I do actually have it up here on the screen as well, but the area where the wastewater treatment plant is right here, per the revised petition, the district would extend 100 feet back from Filter Bed Road and continue all the way up to this parcel right here. And the issue there was we had some concerns about isolated pockets of zoning, essentially, or spot zoning based on the way it was configured prior. So the petition has been amended to have that 100-foot wide path there back from Filter Bed Road over the town parcel.
Have it back.
Yeah, so measured 100 feet back from the boundary of the road into the parcel.
And so what you just gave us is the actual petition that, okay.
Yeah, this has not been submitted to the town clerk yet, but we anticipate that this is likely one of the final versions of the petition.
I was just curious as to why you included these. I think those are 3 residents, and then that's a resident on Varney Road. I was wondering what your thought process was for including those particular properties.
Well, the thought was to tie Filter
You have to use the mic.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Victor.
Okay, sorry.
So the thought process was the town, the planning board currently has the original request to Matt was the planning board, based on the economic development's recommendation, was you guys are widening out and going north and southbound side of Pine Hill to increase that. So you guys have something written to go on to the ballot to increase the Pine Hill district, basically make it a commercial zone,
Right.
both sides of the street. And because filter bed ties into and attaches after reviewing it and attaches to Pine Hill, the goal would be to essentially extend that Pine Hill district down filter bed to the extent that, you know, everyone feels. I felt it kind of natural that, you know, down when it comes to the end of filter bed, you have the bank, the dentist's office, the gym, and the other stuff down there. So I think it almost fits being a natural extension all the way down through. It shouldn't impact. It would probably, the people that have the residential properties later on, maybe whatever, 10 years from now, they decide to sell or move on, it would probably increase their property values and not decrease them. But so the idea was to just run the strip all the way down filter bed. But my request was, we can do this as a petition, and based on conversation, I think we will submit a petition on this. But the goal would be to see if the planning board would entertain attaching this to the Pine Hill District commercial extension, right? That's whatever you call that. I'm not sure the name, but it's the Pine Hill enhancement. And so, you know, I know talking to Mr. and Mrs. Quimby were here last time, Seamus Keating with Key Days here, you know, as a property holder. I spoke with Steve, you know, Durgan today, and he's unavailable to attend. But, you know, the goal would be, I think, a natural, you know, it's a fit. It's most of this land is used commercially anyway, except minus those first five or six properties. So
Okay.
that was my request, is to see if you guys would add it to the Pine Hill rezoning article.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Peter.
What commercial activity is actually being done in those southern 8 or 9 lots presently? In other words, the ones that are down here. Is there presently commercial activity there?
Yeah, so I purchased the old Kimball sawmill. Is that what you're talking about, Peter? Mm-hmm. So, which had several uses, and you know, we're putting storage back in there at this point. We're rebuilding one of those buildings. We've got that cleaned up. I know Seamus had purchased he's my neighboring partner across the street. So he has his construction business that's run out of there. And I think you have a couple other uses which Seamus can speak to. We have the town's parcel, which is the sewage treatment plant, which covers a lot of it. The Taylor community actually is a commercial enterprise that has residences, but they're a commercial enterprise. Goodhue Hawkins has the large storage building on the right. And if we were to continue following it, you end up behind Tinker's Flooring and Winnipesaukee Lumber.
Yeah, but there are only 2 commercial properties that are being operated in that southern small little section. Is that right? There's the old Kimball Lumber, and then your
in the southern portion, right?
Right.
Yes.
And so if those have been grandfathered in, is it really necessary to change the zoning? I mean, they're there, they're able to operate.
Seamus Keating, Key Day Builders. We own the property across the street from Victor. So we're not currently commercial property. We had a variance, and we are a light construction yard, which has never made a whole lot of sense to any of us because of all the activity that happens on that road on a daily basis. One being the wastewater treatment plant. You guys got trucks coming down that road every single day, backing into our property, grabbing wastewater treatment, pulling out. We got Goodhue Hawkins traveling down the road, I don't know how many times a day, all day long. We've got a lot of commercial activity on the road on a daily basis. We've got Napa, the bank, the gym. We've got all this stuff, people coming down and using our property on a daily basis, turning around, moving around, all which is completely fine with us. It just feels like a commercial area all around. The houses that are down in there are on the, not that means anything, but on a lower, income of things. It feels like a commercial district. It feels commercial. It looks commercial. It's being used as a commercial road pretty much all day long, aside from the few people that are living in that southern district that you're speaking of. So we're just curious why we can't take this property that's downtown Wolfeboro, just outside of the sidewalks. The sidewalks end just a few hundred yards from where we are. Why is this not zoned commercially? And there was a lumber yard being operated there from the 70s right up through, I don't even know when does anybody know when? Kimball's? Well, when? 6-8 years ago, where they were running a commercial business. And I don't know if it was legal.
So, but you're documenting that there are two businesses there that are closest to the water treatment area. And
yeah, and our business is, we're operating under a variance, like construction yard. And we can only do so many things with what we have to work with based on the rules and regs that you have put in front of us, which we're abiding to. And we'd like to do a little bit more and grow and actually improve on the area. And I'd like to do a lot more to our building, but I don't want to invest any more than we already have. We've already made substantial improvements to the building that we have bought, but we can only do so much with what we have to work with based on how much we can grow. If we can't grow and operate a commercial business out of that property, then I don't want to make any improvements to it.
Then why do the other ones further towards the center of Wolfeboro need to be included in this area?
Well, I think that because it's on the same stretch of road. So I don't know how unless you take from our properties that way, I don't know how you don't do that because it's the only way through. And those people that are living in that area would just simply live in a commercial area just like everybody else in Wolfeboro does in the downtown area, just right around the corner. So when you turn the corner onto, Varney? And you go down Varney and you've got Napa, you've got residences in between all those businesses. They're living in the same kind of an area that we're operating in. So we're just, what's the difference? It's just simply turning the corner. It's kind of all the same stretch of road. It just seems like it's just such a natural flow of business down through there. And I think that it would only improve on the downtown area, maybe eventually, and just, kind of add to the growth in a positive way. He wants to do good things. We want to do good things. We want to improve. Everything looks like shit, crap down there, and we want to make it better. But what's the point if we can't do what we want to do and grow with the rest of you?
Thank you.
Even if you look at Pine Hill, we're changing the north side of the road, there's a lot of residences there, but there's still some commercial activities that have probably been there forever that are not technically legal, or they're operating under a variance like we would be. So I don't know the difference between where you say, well, we can do this on Pine Hill, but we can't do it on filter bed. I just don't see that changing this zone, if you're a residence today and you have a residential property, I don't see why changing it to commercial would be a detriment to it. Whereas, the reality is changing it to commercial would probably be a big benefit downstream for the town. I know in speaking with, Steve Durgan today, he said the addition of their storage building there, they've doubled their employment, to, the number of people they employ in town and kept in town, which, it's a big deal. So economically, it's, to me, it seems like, we're out of downtown, we're out of the sight of, most people, but I don't know that changing it to commercial actually would be a deterrent to anybody that has residences there currently. So.
Okay.
Have you communicated at all with the residences to the, I guess, south?
I have not.
As what?
Have-
Well, we did, when we went for the light variance, we communicated to the residents what we were trying to do and what we were hoping to do, and we were able to obtain that variance. And now we're trying to take it one step further. And, you know, we have, people are walking the road and they stop in for, you know, Kinlan, and we have a great relationship with everybody on the street, and we only want to make what we have there better than what it is. And in order to do that, we feel like it needs to be commercially zoned, so we can grow properly in the way that we, you know, what we're envisioning. And it's only going to, like Victor said, it's only going to improve everybody that lives in that road. It's just going to increase what their property's worth. I mean, it's.
Can you give us some examples of what you're looking to do that you're not
Well, you
currently
know,
permitted
I
to
can't,
do?
currently I can't technically operate the business the way I'd like to out of my space. So in other words, because it's not commercial, I can't have any kind of transactions as far as in the way of monetary, right? So if we're workers, we build and we construct, and we have craftsmanship, and we build cabinets, but I can't have a cabinet shop there because I'm selling something. So I have to do it off-site. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to build a proper building with heat, have a cabinet shop, meet my prospective clients, my current clients, hold meetings, you know, hopefully get paid for what we're doing on-site, and be able to have a proper place of business, have some proper signage out front, landscaping, you know, create a place of business.
And employ more people.
And employ more people, exactly. And
Yeah, are you all set? Yeah, okay. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
What exactly does your variance allow you to do there?
well, it's a light construction. What are we? We're 20. Light
You're a
commercial.
light contractor's
Light
yard.
contractor's yard. So what is that? The 28,000-pound machinery.
Right.
We can. Well, you know, as far as what we can store our equipment. We can. Basically, it's a storage facility at the moment for our company.
You cannot do retail, though.
I cannot do retail there, and I would like the opportunity to do retail. I'd like to be able to bring prospective clients to our property, show them what we're making.
And there was a,
But I will say that building that he is in was commercial when Paul operated it. I mean, he sold lumber and wood and boards and.
yeah, he did that, and I've read his file, and we both know that perhaps there were some irregularities present in that file.
absolutely.
I sat on the ZBA when you guys came for the variance.
Yeah.
I interviewed your abutters to get their feelings as to how they felt about the Kimball space, which was a wreck,
Yes.
being turned into your light contractor's yard. And everyone was in favor of that application by variance without retail. And to your credit, you brought that lot up, and it looks like a properly functioning business. But your abutters at the time, who are not present here and who are not represented on your map, did not want retail and were comfortable with a light contractor's yard because they understood what that was, and there was not going to be a whole lot of activity there. There was not going to be any retail activity there. What worries me about this application is that I don't see any of them here tonight.
Maybe because it's of no concern to them, and if it was, they would be here.
Well, it's agreed. One could argue that. One could also argue, in the case of one of the abutters that I knew at the time, one was not mobile at all, and the other one was taking care of him. So it might be that couple could not come to the ZBA hearing
Sure.
for that reason,
But-
perhaps can't come here for that reason. The fact that they're not here doesn't mean that they're in favor. It doesn't mean that they're against.
No, but they have the right to be here, and if they, you know, I agree with you completely, and I don't think that's, you know, an argument of any kind.
It worries me that those who are in favor are speaking for, and those whose property will change from residential to commercial are not here.
Well,
no,
I wouldn't-
No, the
I-
petition
if-
warrant article, which is, you said you're going to be submitting it, that will require a public hearing, and that
Yeah.
will require notification.
And Mike, just so you know, we didn't notify property owners, obviously, for this petition consideration. So
You did not.
We did
you only
not
notify for the
petition.
planning board endorsed change on the northern side. This is still a petition warrant article. And the planning board should not be individually noticing property owners based on a petition.
And we're not I'm not speaking for anybody in any,
But they will
except for
be
ourselves.
They would be notified, yes. If this moves forward, they would be individually notified because it's a zoning district.
I apologize. I was under the assumption that anyone who wanted to speak for or against would be here tonight.
No.
Yeah,
And we're not speaking for anyone. We're speaking on
no,
behalf
they-
of my
Okay.
property.
Well,
and the property
that's fine.
Mr. Droin he was just wanted us to be aware of the fact that this petition is going to be submitted, and then we will be having a public hearing.
And as far as this board member is concerned, I would feel a lot more comfortable about the
Sure.
public hearing that's going to come forward if the people who are there, who are residential, not part of your operation, show up or at least give us their feelings about what they think of this proposal.
Well, yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. And I would just hope that if they were new at our intentions and knew that we were just trying to make improvements of the area, then maybe they'd be for it.
Okay.
Anyone else? Dawn?
I think that we're going to find a lot of similarities between this and what we are potentially, not definitely, proposing on Pine Hill. I mean, there will be people in favor and people against, and we'll have to listen to everybody
Sure.
and, improve the town and make sure that nobody's rights are violated.
I would just hope that everybody would take into consideration of what that road is being used for on a daily basis. And there's a lot more big trucks going down that road than there are household vehicles. And, that says a lot about what's happening down there on a daily basis.
There's no argument there.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, Matt, did you want to?
Well, I was gonna reiterate the fact that petition warrant articles do come for a vote at the planning board, whether to support or not. Obviously, Mr. Druin stated that he had some interest in the planning board potentially including this in the planning board's proposal on the north side of Pine Hill Road. I think that the board probably should give some indication potentially now of whether they intend to do that. But it may be that the board is not comfortable doing that until a public hearing takes place. But I just want to, I think that,
And Mr. Droin is faced with deadlines.
yes.
And they obviously are trying to plan for that area, so
Yep.
and he'll be submitting the petition, I'm assuming, by next week, 2
Yep.
weeks from now.
Yeah, and I've spoken to Mr. Drew multiple times. I want to make sure his right to petition is protected, so that's why I've really encouraged him to submit the petition regardless of
Right.
what the planning board does choose to do.
Yes,
Because we don't want him to lose that ability.
right. I mean, it seems as if his plan is sort of concrete, and we really haven't formulated
Yeah.
what we want to do with the other part of Pine Hill yet. So it seems like there should be two
Separate,
separate,
I think we should keep them uncoupled.
yes.
Yeah.
Right. Does that make sense to you folks? That we'll be going, you submit your petition, and we're going to be talking about the district over Pine Hill Road, and we'll be sort of going on parallel courses. Is that the best way?
but independent courses. I just want to make sure that.
Independent, parallel.
Well, it's
Okay.
probably, the fact is we won't be ready to answer the question properly because we haven't gone through the process for the Pine Hill Road change, if it's going to come. So, I mean, we have to listen to everybody to decide that, and, perhaps this is a petition for next year, or a petition for, 4 properties and not 12 properties. I don't know. But I think that it's premature for us to support it.
Well, I think.
Right, no, he's
Right.
not asking for us to support
No,
it.
it's a petition warrant article, so you can put on that petition anything you want.
Yeah, and to be clear, the board could decide after public hearing that will happen as part of this petition that the board wants to support the petition.
Absolutely.
It's somewhat unusual, but it happens when the
Right.
board decides it's comfortable with something. So the board could decide to support the petition warrant article fully after a public hearing process.
Right.
If a member of the public points out a zoning change which makes logical sense, and by petition, and the planning board can support that, but we have to hear from the people who are going to be most affected, and those are the ones who we haven't heard from yet.
So when
Public hearing.
It would be likely on one or two occasions, definitely on one occasion, of course. The first possible opportunity would be January 8th, and the second would likely be January 22nd. Those are the two dates we've identified for public hearings. And again, because this is a boundary change to a district smaller than 100 properties, it has to go through an individual noticing process where each property owner is noticed directly. So we would ensure that...
You're talking about the petition warrant article.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
We still have to make special delivery or whatever it is, notice for a petition warrant article?
I need to confirm that, but I see no reason why that wouldn't be the case. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we all sort of agree that we're going to have, you'll be submitting your petition. We haven't quite decided what we're going to do with ours yet, our application. So, but we will be having the public hearings nevertheless for Mr. Droyan's petition, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We should hold a public hearing for each one of these measures, their petition and our Pine Hill extension at the same time.
Agree.
Right.
Fully.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
I anticipate for Pine Hill Road, the planning board's proposal, we will have two public hearings for that. It's our process. Usually we have two hearings.
okay. I'm not sure if that's the clarity you were looking for, Mr. Droyan, but
Yeah, I mean,
but we're moving ahead, so.
So we're going to go to public hearing and then...
Well, the application, the petition needs to be submitted to the clerk's office,
yeah, and I
and then
think,
that starts the process.
because Victor and I have had some conversations, so I think the board is deciding basically that they are not going to include the petition in their proposal at this time because they don't feel that the property owners have had the notice they need. So you should continue forward with your petition. The planning board may choose to support it after the public hearing process, but it's going to be independent of what the board is submitting on Pine Hill Road, if that is submitted at all.
Well,
Okay.
I guess one of my questions would be, are these mutually exclusive? In other words, could the Pine Hill Road thing be not approved and this be approved?
That could happen.
And I think that that's,
Yes.
therefore, both of them could be approved, none of them can be approved, or one or the other could be approved.
Right, well, that's a very good point, Peter.
And that's the reason why they're separate.
Yes, that it's really more probably to both projects
And there isn't any
advantage to be
conflict.
separate.
Right, there isn't any conflict between the two proposals at all.
Right.
They're totally in alignment.
Okay, so we'll go on to the next item, which is actually the listening session, the Pine Hill Road Development District being proposed by the Planning Board.
Yes, so we did,
See you later.
thank you guys, appreciate it, thank you. We did individually notice all the property owners that were contained within the boundary area that we discussed at our prior meetings. And just to sort of back up a second, it looks like we have one potential person in the audience to listen in. We are proposing to potentially extend the Pine, well, Brad doesn't really count.
Oh, no, he does. He's a property owner.
Kidding. So we're looking at potentially extending the existing Pine Hill Road Development District. And I actually may go up on the stage and sort of walk through this too, just to make it kind of clear. So we're looking at Texas map. Never mind, it's not here. Okay. So, and hopefully you got a map in the mail as well with the mailer that we did. We did send this map out with the existing zoning map, the Pine Hill Road Development District zoning, and just a brief letter. So I know this is tough to see, but this is Pine Hill Road that comes up right here, heads north. The Public Works Garage is just up on the right-hand side there, the first parcel that's sort of shaded in blue. Down here, these blue outlined parcels, these are the Polini pits that exist right now. And the area outlined in the teal color That is the existing Pine Hill Road Development District, and that's a predominantly commercial zone, I would say aimed at medium to moderate intensity commercial uses. And this includes the Goodhue Hawkins Storage Yard, Winnie Lumber, and then the business park on the north-hand side of the zoning district. One of the things that the planning board, I think, has recognized, as the risk of speaking for the board, is that we have sort of a mix of commercial uses on the eastern side of Pine Hill Road as it stands right now, some of which may potentially have some interest in the future in expanding or modifying their use, or potentially we have some residential properties there that are interested in some sort of business or commercial use as well. And in recognizing that, there's been consideration of actually adding these parcels on that eastern side right into the Pine Hill Road Development District that exists on the western side of the road. Additionally, we've identified these 3 parcels down here. This is Pine Hill Storage, and then again these 2 Polini pits. Those are currently zoned within the mix of a residential zone in the Bay Street Limited Business District. And it seems logical that those are actually uses that are more compatible with what we have just next door in that Pine Hill Road Development District. So it makes sense for us to actually bring those 2 parcels into a more appropriate zone that makes them a more conforming use. I think the intent of tonight is to hear from the property owners and get a little feedback on what their thoughts are on this potential petition, whether they view it as a positive or a negative, and to collect this feedback, because at this time the planning board really hasn't, I think I can speak for the board saying the planning board hasn't decided whether to move forward with this at this time. And really we want to get the property owners' feedback so that we can make an effective decision about that. I'm going to sort of stop there. We do have, again, some owners in the audience, but I don't know if the planning board members want to add anything to what I just said.
So just to be clear, the blue parcels, which are not in the Pine Hill zone,
Yep.
they are in residential zones.
So the Polini pits are actually in a mix. They're in Bay Street Limited on the front of the parcel and a residential zone to the rear of the parcel. Sort of an interesting situation.
And the ones across the street on Pine Street are all residential.
Residential. They're all in the village residential, general residential zone as it stands right now.
Okay, but they're not all residential.
Correct. You mean zoning, Vaughn?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, they're all in a residential zone right now, general residential.
Including the accidents happen.
That's correct. And that parcel just went through a variance.
Yeah, that's by a variance, right, yeah.
How about the rest of them, Maganzini and Huggins Hospital, are they by variance?
They are, I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer all of that. I know that the hospital aid is by variance, I believe, because I remember we saw that variance when we looked at the accidents happen expansion. Maganzini, I'm not certain that that's a variance use, Mike.
But the 2 Pinio lots,
I think that's an existing non-conforming use.
Right.
existing non-conforming, okay.
Maganzini is the one I'm not totally sure about.
Either way, it's at the very least, it's existing
It's an
non-conforming.
existing non-conforming use.
Okay.
And night security, I mean, I know that was retail use.
Yeah.
It was a
It's tough to tell whether it's existing non-conforming or variance. My gut says it was probably an existing non-conforming use that predates zoning.
Which sort of is an acknowledgement that previous planning boards considered this side of Pine Hill Road to be residential,
Yes.
and the other side has become commercial. It wasn't always.
On the western side,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
become more commercial. Yep. There's been a bit of creep, potentially, of commercial uses in a sense.
Well, the Pine Hill Road redevelopment or development district was created specifically to encourage
Right.
commerce and industry on that side of Pine Hill Road, and the other side was intentionally left to be residential with an interspersing of commercial uses by variance or non-conforming use over time.
Yep.
So it seems
point.
one of the critical questions is for the residents of that street. Would they like to have the, let's say, business opportunity to become potentially more commercial? Or would they like to preserve the residential zone qualities?
And I think that's why we've invited the property owners tonight, because I think that is the critical question. I think the board, my sense is that the board truly is open to whatever option here, but
Right.
I think it is critical to hear from the property owners. So I can see that, depending on what we hear tonight, this may be heavily driven by feedback that we hear at a public hearing later in the process. If we have many more property owners come out in support or opposition, I think the board may choose to change its course potentially based on that.
And I think we have to remember that we have a responsibility to the town to do what is best for the town in general. We also have a responsibility to listen to the landowners to hear what they have to say. But those two may not be congruent all the time. It may be that we need to think about rezoning for the good of the town, and unfortunately, property owners would have to have a change in their zoning because it's better for the town in general. So we have to be careful, like in the case of the Druin petition that we just heard. There is some logical sense to expanding the Pine Hill Road district down Bay Street, or to encompass the properties along that side of the street, because it seems to make logical sense. I'm not sure it does here.
Well, another possibility that we haven't really considered is, instead of doing the whole street, we take a chunk of it, the chunk that's already primarily blue.
Right.
And that might go for this property too, we consider, or they consider a chunk of it, stops at a certain.
That was actually my original proposal when I brought it to the board, to stop at that last commercial property on the eastern side and not go all the way to the northernmost commercial property, because I viewed the concentration really being between that and the Public Works garage.
Well, right, I mean, accidents happen or whatever, and that makes sense to change that one. It makes sense to change night security.
Right.
But
And some of them are, I agree. I think
I think we should move forward and get this public hearing process going so that we can hear what, maybe they all want to have it.
Yeah, and I think that's the flexibility. I think the board could decide at the second public hearing to only go north to the Pineal parcel, for example, if they really want to. You have up until the last moment to amend it based on the public feedback. So,
sir, do you mind telling us where you live, and do you have any thoughts about this?
thank you for staying, by the way.
Yes, thank you. Our meetings are really so exciting.
So you're right to the south of Pineo, correct? Okay.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, maybe I turned it off.
Ooh, that's loud.
I'm right there, yeah.
So I'm kind of in the middle of a lot of the activity that's going on there. I don't know that I have one opinion one way or another. I came here just to really find out more about what was going on and what the proposal was all about. I think the questions that I had would be that would there be any sort of a tax increase if there was a rezoning of commercial property, or also would be interested to see if that would increase the property value if it was rezoned commercial as well. It could potentially give me an opportunity down the road. So I kind of do agree that there is a fair bit of commercial activity all up and down that side of the road today, as is the other side of the road too, right? With the businesses right there. So I've long kind of felt that was. It really sort of is a commercial property. In fact, my property long ago was zoned commercially as well because there was a business out in the back of the of my house too, which was Pine Hill Kennels. It was back in the 80s for a short period of time. So again, at one point my property was part of the commercial activity. So, today I was just really trying to figure out more about what the discussion was about and what.
Yeah, and that's a good question that we should at least have for the public hearing about the assessment impact. And I think that was brought up at a prior meeting. I apologize, I didn't get that information. I didn't include it in the letter, but that's a good question. I don't have the answer right now, but it's definitely one that I think we should have prepared for property owners.
It's pretty clear that the assessment is based on property value. So if property value goes up,
Yeah.
then no matter for whatever reason, if you suddenly have a view of the lake, or if you suddenly become commercial, or for any reason, if your value goes up, then your taxes go up. It's not because of the zone you're in, but it may go up because of that.
In some cases, there is a zoning factor, though, in assessors' methodologies, so I want to make sure that there isn't an automatic trigger in the assessor's methodology that would, if you're a commercial zone, you automatically incur an increase in assessed value of X. I don't believe that's in there, but I want to check with the assessor.
So we can get some information from the assessor.
Yeah, I can
think
talk to Todd
that's
and get an answer on that.
That's a good suggestion.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll need answers to those questions before the public hearing, of course, because they'll come up.
Yeah, the property value question is a bit more challenging because it's really controlled by the adjacent properties and the development that happens. But I think having an answer to the assessment question is definitely one I can provide.
Yeah, well, we can't predict whether your property value is going to go up or down. We may be able to get information regarding the tax implications.
Okay.
Is it possible when we notice people to provide the descriptions of the uses in the zones?
So I actually did include the zoning information when I sent it out to the property owners. I included the zoning documentation. I know it's a little bit hard to understand if you're not used to it. The list of permitted uses, though, is so long, I didn't want to include it in the letter itself, which I thought about doing. But we could try and make it a bit more clear potentially in our next letter that goes out. Yeah,
And some of those were of interest too, with the having multiple dwellings on a smaller parcel, because I had actually wanted to do that some time ago, or had inquired about putting two domiciles on the same piece of property. Was told that it had to be at least 2 acres for 2 domiciles on the same property, or they would have to be connected somehow.
Yeah,
and it seemed like this, just by what you had mentioned on the proposal, on the documentation you had sent, that it could open that up potentially.
So you can do a duplex, but it has to be attached.
Okay.
2 independent homes cannot exist on the same lot.
Okay.
So they have to be connected, unless it's a multifamily style design.
Okay.
So yeah, two disconnected dwelling units is not permitted by zoning. It's a little confusing, the zoning, the way it's written, but if you have other questions.
I thought I must have misread that. I thought that was
okay.
one of the permitted uses.
So it's
Okay.
It's not a permitted
it's not.
use. It's not
Okay.
permitted
All
use.
right. Okay.
Did have a little bit of a panic there, hoping
Yeah.
it hadn't been written in there in the past, but no, it's definitely not a permitted use. But I could see how some of these things, we allow a detached dwelling unit and an accessory apartment and a duplex. That doesn't mean you can do all 3 of those together. They can be done independently. So that's why it's a little confusing, I think, in the way
Yeah.
zoning is
Okay.
written. So, yeah, it's not permitted.
Okay. Well, anything else you wanted to, any of your other thoughts you might have?
No, like I said, I just was curious to find out more information, and it sounds like there's going to be more, another hearing at some point in the future
Yes,
to
there-
discuss it further.
Yeah,
There will
so-
be.
Or 2.
We're planning for the 8th and the 22nd.
Okay.
And kind of pencil or even pen those in at this point.
Okay.
Those will be our 2 public hearings. on
December?
this. Of January.
January, okay.
January, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much.
This whole, zoning is sort of bizarre because you go across the center line of the highway and you get something different.
Yeah.
And so in some ways that ends up speaking to make the whole thing commercial. At the same time, I think when you get past the present commercial blues out there, then it sort of changes character, and there's right now only one driveway which goes off to a manufacturer. And so, but at the same time, if you run it to that distance, And then the rest of the way, it's still, go across the center line and you're in a different world. So it's a interesting thing, and why it was set up that way originally, I guess, is a question.
Well, we have that condition whenever you cross a state line or a town line, it's an arbitrary human construct. Yeah.
Brad, did you, you're a property owner, did you want to share some of your thoughts? I mean, actually, your dad, you've owned that property for a long time. So.
Right, yeah, that was bought back in '64 and then developed at that stage as a contractor's yard and operated that way for, when we closed it down, probably, I think we still kept the permit going through till accidents happened, came in, which is what, 5 years ago now, I think, something like that. So for 50 years, it operated that way. I just say, I think this is a good idea. Thought that for about 50 years that side should be commercial. And I think it's flipped back and forth a couple times over this period of time. It had gone to commercial and then back to residential. From what I've heard anyway, I'm not 100% sure, but it just makes sense with the amount of commercial, especially on this end down here near the Public Works garage with my property. Got the hospital aid there, night security, Magazzini's right there. You have a whole strip right there. You guys were talking a little bit before about night security there. That used to be Pine Hill Shoe Repair back in the day. Now, I don't recall whether she operated under a variance or if that was, I don't know. So, as I said, I was on the board back in the 80s, and we didn't have much going on in that section then. That was back when we had all the condos coming in on the lake and stuff was our focus back in those days in the planning board. So, so I just say, I'm in favor of this, and I really do hope that these public hearings bring the people out so that we get to the planning board that we all get a feel for everybody up there, right. And not just a handful of people on just one end of the spectrum, and then later on say, oh geez, I wish I'd come out and said something because I have a different opinion of it. I really hope that word gets out and people do come and say their opinions one way or the other on it. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that when the notice of the hearing is out there, it should be very clear that they could have communication with the board even if they can't be present.
Send a
They
letter.
could submit comments.
So anyway, but I think that should be emphasized to
Right.
them in that communication, because there may be some people who are away for those at the time of the hearings or whatever, but they should be made sure that they, in order to get as much information as we can.
Great idea.
And I agree too. I think with the question that Dale asks is, and you're going to get the question on that, the answer on that is just because of zone changes to make sure that these people aren't bumped into a different, tax assessment on that property and stuff. I can see, if it gets changed over, if they want to change to commercial, then your assessment will probably change. But just the fact that they still have a residential home in a commercial zone there, I would hope it wouldn't change on all the people who still maintain their residences there. So. Thank you.
And a good question to ask is, let's say you have a residence and it turns into commercial property, can you get taxed as a residence and then sell it and somebody comes along and builds a commercial property, let's say, or uses it commercially and comes in for site plan review, then it could change.
Yes.
If there's some kind of grandfather status in taxation.
No. So you're saying it's taxed residentially right now. It becomes a commercial use.
There's no change in the house until day 2 years from now. It turns into a commercial property. They come in for site plan review. At that point, it should get taxed as if it's a commercial property, and not until if that's possible, it would seem to be fair.
No, I understand. That's a good question.
Yeah.
Let me.
And Matt, I'm sure I can get the information somehow or other. I think it might be helpful to know where the variances are, and I'll do that. I know you've got.
Well, you're right, Kathy. I should know. You're right. We should figure that out.
Yeah.
Those are good
Okay.
questions.
So that the next time we look at this, we'll be able to specifically say, well, yes, this has a variance for whatever it has the variance for. And that, I think, also will sort of help us if we're going to go with everything that we're talking about or make it smaller. So do I have a couple weeks to do that?
Yeah, oh yeah, we have a couple weeks to do that. Yeah.
January,
Yeah, January 8th. Notices, yeah, well, I'll talk about the timeline in a minute, but
Yeah, okay.
we do have time to do that.
Okay, so any other thoughts, folks?
Just looking forward to the hearings.
Okay, all right, so,
Speaking of boundaries, by the way, that boundary line adjustment that we just did, or the lot adjustment that we just did, the boundary is the thread of Willie Brook.
Do you know how long it took me to figure that out from the plan?
oh, it says it
A
right
lot.
on it.
yeah.
I missed that note. I mean, it took me 5 minutes, but
I'm sure that there
Frustrating
is a
for
proper definition of what thread means. How does one establish the thread of a brook which can meander
yeah,
over?
So the Connecticut River is the
boundary,
thread
yep.
between New Hampshire and Vermont.
That's
Oh, my
right.
gosh.
Although we have it right to
We
the
may be
far,
bigger than we think
Yeah.
we are.
we got right to the far border, to the far side of Connecticut River, didn't we? We don't, in New York, the boundary between New York State and New Jersey is the middle of the Hudson. Connecticut River, it's the Vermont bank is the boundary. Oh, yeah. Well, when you cross the bridges, you get the welcome to New Hampshire on the Vermont side.
the more you know.
You
Okay.
also find that the Omaha, Nebraska airport is actually in Iowa. And the reason is the Missouri River changed its course.
Okay.
And so property which all of a sudden was, it's like,
All right, let's move on here
Trivia, that's wonderful.
It's just.
to... Yes, thank you very much. We'll see you again.